We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Clift. Now, Dr. Kai Bretz is a German-Australian corporate leader, elite athlete, entrepreneur, and author of the inspirational book, Turning Right, Inspire the Magic. After earning a master's degree in international business and getting awarded a doctorate in European law in record time, Kai has worked in more than a dozen countries as a consultant for McKinsey. During his time as a corporate leader, he pursued his passion for long-distance running and learned to master the mental game. Kai stepped up from the average hobby marathon runner to becoming one of the fastest ultramarathon runners in the world. In his first year of ultrarunning in 2015, he improved the race record of the 250 kilometre long Big Red Run by more than 5 hours. Then he joined the Australian national team in the 24-hour format and became the fastest ever Australian at the World Championships, clocking, get this, 259.67 kilometres within 24 hours. 259 kilometres in 24 hours. And in 2019, he got awarded the Australian Ultraperformance of the Year award. The pivotal moment unraveling his personal transformation was a simple right turn at his garden gate. Accidentally, one day Kai turned right and realized that he had never turned right at that juncture. Too much was he caught up in his need for predictability, clinging to discipline and self-control. Turning right made him realize that there was a world out there waiting for him to explore. So metaphorically speaking, Kai started turning right more often, embracing uncertainty. Over this journey, he learned how to leave behind the limitations he placed on himself, which prevented him from overcoming his biggest challenges and reaching his dreams. His entire perspective on what he was capable of shifted, resulting not only in performance jumps, but also deeper fulfillment. I think you're going to love this interview with Kai that he and I have. It's actually coming out of the vault from one of our Facebook Live interviews for about a year or so ago. And I'm just so impressed by human beings like Kai that can not only tackle the business world in such, just a high performance dude, but also do that with his physicality and with his body as well. I mean, you know me, I'm a pretty, I'm the hobby marathon runner. This guy is incredible. The distances, the challenges. I mean, he ran from the sea, from the ocean to Australia's tallest peak. It's just remarkable. You're going to learn a lot from him in this interview. We talk a lot about embracing uncertainty and how to go from being someone who requires that safety, stability, and structure of certainty to someone who can actually embrace when things don't go the way you plan. And in fact, sometimes when they don't go the way you've planned them to go, that's even better. Something better might even be around the corner for you. So enjoy this interview with Dr. Kai Bretz. Enjoy. Alrighty. Wow. It has been a while since we have gone live on Facebook with the podcast. But for those of you watching and joining us today, live on the Mankind Podcast Facebook page, or Mankind Project Facebook page for that matter, I would like to welcome you to another live recording of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than just one way to be a man. And one of the best ways we do that is to bring on guests, men who we believe model an energy, whether it's through their actions, whether it's through what they do in their mission in the world, whether it's what they've just embodied in their lives. We want to expose our listeners and we want to expose you to those that have walked different paths in life and those that have achieved some pretty remarkable things. And talking about achieving remarkable things, we are talking with 2019's fastest Australian. We're talking with a man and going to connect with a man who has covered 259, I think 0.7 kilometers in 24 hours. I couldn't stand on my feet still for that long. So remarkable athlete, but also a performance and an executive coach for many businesses and companies around the world. Kai Bretz, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brendan. It's really an honor to be here.
Mm. I was so like, you should never measure, or compare with others, and it doesn't take away from my great achievement of completing my marathon back in 2019. But then I meet people like yourself and Dion Leonard, who introduced the two of us. And mate, how on earth can you get your body to cover such distances at such speeds? It just blows my mind and reminds me that we don't need superheroes in comic books when we have human beings that can do things that are superhuman. How do you do this?
Well, first of all, the most important message here is that each one of us can do it. I mean, it doesn't mean everybody has to run 160 miles. That's not the point. But each one of us can do things which are way greater than we can imagine. So the short answer is run with your mind, and you will run much further than when you run with your legs.
It's I think important that you bring that up. The mental game is such a huge thing. Prior to, the Michael Phelpses of the world and the Serena Williams, we weren't necessarily having the conversation so much publicly about mindset and performance. It was always gifted physical athletes being able to move their bodies and perform in a way to achieve greatness. And when we had the Phelpses and the Serena Williams come up, that's when we started to get an insight into just how important the mind game is. That in fact, without the mental game, there's no physical performance. And so I want to ask you, Kai, what is it that you believe separates the average Joe or Jane on the couch watching the Olympics and looking at those athletes? What is it mindset wise that creates that gap between those high performers and those that may not believe that they are capable of such a thing?
Yeah, it's when you're asking that question, I'm going back to a very specific incident in a race where Dion Leonard and I were racing. So it was a 200 miler. And I learned the answer to your question from another competitor who had DNF'd. So she had pulled out already, and she was at one of the last 8 stations. And she looked at me and she looked at others. And after the race, she came to me and said, Kai, what is the difference between the front of the pack and the back of the pack? It's not their fitness. They're all fit. You guys are all fit. The difference is you guys at the front can focus on what needs to be done when it has to be done. And the guys at the back, they somehow get so dazzled and flustered that they forget to eat. They forget to put the sunscreen on. They forget something, and they just don't make it a priority what needs to be done in that very moment. And therefore, it all adds up, and they are way further back. They are hours, in our case, actually, they were days behind us at the front. And that was her answer. And I think she was actually right. Is can we, under pressure, focus on what needs to be done?
And you mentioned that whether it's sunscreen or eating at the right time can create that gap in that margin. And it's those like seemingly insignificant things, right? Not just in a race, but in life that add up, that equate. So I want to ask you, can you give us an insight into a time in your life where you didn't have this performance mindset, where there were other things in your life that were like not putting on the sunscreen, or just using that as a metaphor? What was before?
Oh, absolutely. It's so everything shifted probably around about 7 years ago. So I was very focused always on success, and the reason being, if I go really far back, is success was my only safe place in life somehow. So I was growing up in a family with a very aggressive father, and I figured out very quickly as a kid that without success, I will never be somewhat free and independent. So I would always be somehow subject to his beatings, subject to him forcing me to do things. So I was always playing the long game of I do in school what needs to be done, because one day I will be free. So I had that discipline within me, and that was probably the very German aspect of, if anybody's wondering where I'm from, it's Germany. So I had that part in me. But success in a way was always paramount for me, because it had such an important, just role in my own well-being. Having said that, though, I overdid it. I completely overdid it. So I know that isn't the issue for many people, but I was too disciplined. I was just too stiff, too rigorous, there was no innovation. There was...
Might I be so bold and at great risk say too German?
Absolutely. No, you can say that. It's I
so
think,
efficient.
Absolutely. And you say, yeah, what's wrong with it? It got me very far in life. And why that is somehow, I think why that is important to everybody listening, even people who are not disciplined at all, is I think we all overdo some of our strengths. There's nothing wrong with discipline. I mean, everybody can see that discipline gets us far, but have too much of it and it tilts and it becomes a liability. And that's the question I ask all of my clients, or I somehow tease out with all of my clients, is what is the strength you are overdoing? And therefore, what is holding you back? Because basically the story for all of us is whatever got us here is now holding us back from the next stage. For me, it was really that discipline, because it was suffocating innovation. It was suffocating the belief that I could just be agile. I couldn't. So for example, back to a race then, if I was prepared for the sun shining, I had sunscreen. I was very disciplined. If I wasn't prepared for rain coming, the rain would completely startle me, because it wasn't on my plan, and the world had to be the way it was in my head, not the way it actually played out. So that was my problem.
Wow. So your success hinged upon external factors in a way, and if you weren't able to be malleable and roll with the punches, you beat yourself up for it.
Correct.
Correct. How was I not prepared for this?
I wasn't prepared for it, and therefore I got a mentor 7 years ago, and his first diagnosis, which didn't resonate with me at all, was saying, Kai, you are just too disciplined. You're not capable to deal with the unexpected. And that was really that was harsh. It was spot on, but it was harsh because...
It was harsh because it was spot on.
Yeah. And it was hard. Yes. And it was harsh because that one, I think at the core of that, Kai, you can't deal with the unexpected, is Kai, you are part of the problem. And that's where probably all our inner journeys start, is that recognition that we are part of the problem. And when we step into that and own it, suddenly it's not harsh anymore. It's we are part of the solution. Well, we are the solution. And that is very empowering, but I hadn't seen that up to that point.
So that was kind of a tipping point moment, and a moment of awareness of like, whoa, and let me correct me if I'm wrong, but you were operating from this place of continual success. However, it sounded like you were hitting a plateau. Like there was a ceiling all of a sudden that you weren't able to break through, but your mind's going, come on, everything that has got me to here has equaled success. Why is this not working anymore? Only to learn that you, in fact, that operating system was no longer effective, was no longer applicable. And perhaps that phase of life was now coming to an end.
Absolutely. And that's very scary times when we notice that something new wants to come in. But in a way, it was really an identity question, because who am I without my discipline? Who am I? In my mind, it was, who am I without success? Because if discipline goes, success would go. That was the logic of my operating system. And I had this very, very profound moment. If I just share that starting story, which was, so my mentor prescribed me doing mystery runs. So he took away all my control and said, go for a run, but let a friend do the run for you. So in a way, you just follow him. If he runs fast, you run fast. If he runs long, you run long. But at no point in time, you know how long the session is going to be, nor what speed. So complete uncertainty, which was hell to me, because the first question which came up was, when is it fair to give up here? Because he will break me. When is it fair to give up? So that kind of win-lose thinking rather than, okay, what's possible? That wasn't on my mind. And he picked me up at my house and went through the garden gate, turned right. I had to turn right with him because that was the rule. And as a German, I could follow rules quite nicely. And in that moment, that was really the epiphany of I had never, ever in my life turned right at my own garden gate. It was so much discipline. I was going out of the house every morning, going for a run, and always to the left to get to the beach. And what my friend did was turning right to go to the beach. So it was just that kind of realization. There's this world out there I'd never entered. And it was just a circuit breaker. Obviously, the rational mind quickly kicked in and said, well, it's the same going right versus left. But I knew that wasn't true. I knew this was way more profound than the pure direction. It had all to do with that metaphorical enter territory I'd never entered before and see where it would lead to and just have some fun with it and explore. And that made all the difference for me.
You know, it's so natural as men. Traditionally, this is not all men, but it's so natural, especially men who like to, access a lot of masculine energy, is to operate from a place of stability, structure. Oftentimes that can turn up in establishing structures almost in a way to create a black and white world. So it's like, okay, from these beliefs and these places and from these habits and behaviors, the world looks like this to me. But how often have we seen that man who almost seems unshakable, that man who almost seems like nothing can rattle them? And then all you do is change their environment, take them away from their comfort, take them away from what they know. Then all of a sudden they can no longer operate. And I've had that. I learned from a young age, only recently, past couple of years, how important it was for me to change my environment. Hence leaving Australia when I had it made there to live in South America and travel and then move to America and live in a van, was to realize, like, I don't know if this van is going to get me to this destination. I don't know if it's going to break down before I get there. I don't know if in Peru I'm going to make it down this river to this destination, or if I'm going to get eaten by a bunch of piranhas. I don't know. But it's in the not knowing, right? It's in removing those structures, changing that environment, changing the way things are done to be able to go, wow, there's so much beauty in the not knowing and in the gray than just the black and white, which I can imagine is very challenging for someone like yourself, coming from an upbringing of order and rule, and then experiencing a lot of success at a young age through order and rule and discipline. And so I want to ask you, Kai, how are things different for you now, having turned right and now choosing to turn right or left or up or down?
I think my operating system has shifted over time, and if we could look into the programming, I'm just building on your metaphor from before, and if we could look into the programming, there are two important lines or two rows of programming which don't exist anymore. And one of them said, it's not safe to play small. It's like, I have to be big in order to somehow stay safe. And that's this kind of control and it's that very masculine upbringing of, I grow up, I somehow beat on my chest and I'm big and then everything is fine. And I experienced that the opposite is true, that it's real vulnerability, not knowing and dealing with whatever comes. Just this week, a client of mine, we were giving feedback to each other, and something very interesting came where he said, Kai, you feel very comfortable saying that you don't know. And that was the CEO saying that. And it was really a big aha moment for his team as well, of just saying, you come here as an expert, and in front of the executive team, you say, I don't know. And none of us have an issue with that. And that's one example, probably, because there's a lot of strength in not knowing and just feeling okay with it. And just quickly, the other programming, which goes even deeper, is it's not safe to be loved. So that was another story which over the last few years has come out. And that's the kind of, obviously, if you go into my own childhood story, it's obvious that I believed that with my father, of just, it's not safe to be loved. I mean, he was beating me up regularly, and my mum was always there for me. But it took me a long time to notice that there were a lot of conditions to be safe with her. It was always, in the end, I had to do what she wanted me to do. Wow. Otherwise, there was this kind of pushing me away.
Conditional love.
I mean, it came from a good place. It's her own story. So I'm not blaming her for that.
Of course.
But I was playing that out all in my life as well, of just noticing, well, when people weren't doing what I wanted them to do, I basically replayed the story I'd experienced of, okay, I kicked them out. I don't need you. If you're not doing what I want you to do, I don't need you. And I could show you that I don't need you. And guess what? It's a lonely place. It's not a direct place for long-term team play. And those things, I again felt very masculine of, I'm the lonely wolf. And isn't it great that I don't need anybody else?
Yeah. The John Waynes and the Clint Eastwoods. And in America, we call that rugged individualism, which is, men that, or women or whoever, that believe that they don't need anyone, that they can be self-made, they can take themselves where they want to be, they don't want to be dependent on anyone, they don't want to ask for help ever. And that only gets people so far, in my experience. And it sounds like that was happening for you too, as the story began to unpack. And if you don't mind me asking, do you mind if I ask about your father?
No, go for it.
Is he still around?
He's still around. I haven't spoken to him for a long time, but
for a long time.
Yeah.
Wow. And so I'm curious about how as you go through your journey of unpacking your upbringing and what that relationship looked like for you, and how the story of your childhood colors the world of how you see, you feel, you experience, and how you logically understand love. What is your hope for your growth and what that might open for your relationship, perhaps with your parents or with others?
What is coming in, and it is coming in relatively slowly, is true compassion. It's intellectually, I get that for a long time, but it's that kind of really allowing it to come in, because it's, for such a long time, there were too many fears attached to it. Like it's this kind of, it's not safe to be loved or to want to be loved, because there's rejection in there. There is, it's a scary place. Yeah. So compassion, even that feeling for others, that I just can accept them. And I'm getting truly to the place, and I think with my father, I have gotten truly to the place, although I'm not speaking to him, I'm truly feeling compassion for him and his own story. And I'm struggling with that still with my mother, which is, there's a way stronger bond, but it takes a little bit, the wounds are probably deeper. And it's really letting go of, there's weakness attached to compassion. And that's just, I know that intellectually, but really feeling that, I'm on that process.
Wow. I love chatting with people like yourself, Kai, that have achieved remarkable things. And I always feel a close connection to those who do it physically, having been a professional athlete myself. But I love meeting people like yourself who are in a position of influence and in a position of guiding and helping others, but not from this place of I have arrived. You know, you have the achievements, you have the t-shirt, you have the medals and the accolades, but you're still in your process. You're still in your journey. And there's still darkness to uncover and deal with and learn from. And for many, and this here's a great way in my mind to frame this up. There are those listening to this who could never fathom their feet taking them 260 kilometers, 160 miles. But there could be people capable of such a feat like yourself. And this doesn't refer to you so much because you're doing the work, but they would never take the lid off of those emotions. It's the same. They equate it to the same feat of something that isn't possible for them. It's too hard. It's too difficult. It's too traumatic. Yet you've gone from these physical challenges now leaning into these emotional challenges and this emotional growth. Do you separate the two as far as challenge for you in your life? Physical feats like the achievements you've had with the ultra running or the emotional journey?
No, they go hand in hand. I truly believe that if we want to achieve anything great outside in the world, it doesn't happen without an inner journey. And because every single big challenge is actually the question to me of who do I need to be to somehow to conquer this challenge. And the typical question in the past would have been, what do I need to do? It's the wrong question.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's the operant conditioning of especially men. What do I have to do as a warrior, as a man? I have to do, I have to fix. No, it's who do you have to be? That's the key that unlocks it.
Couldn't agree more. It's always the inner journey. Every single round, you've been referring to it. There is no end to it, but every round starts with that realization over and over again. I am part of the problem. Whatever the external problem might be, then there is an inner journey of who do I need to be and what do I need to let go of? And that's actually really exciting. We don't have to learn anything. Because that's the other paradox. We always think, what do I have to learn? What do I have to add? What kind of app do I need to download? So, and it's not about adding, it's about letting go. It's about letting go of the fear of rejection. It's about letting go of the belief of nobody loves me. It's the letting go rather than the acquiring. And then it becomes lighter and lighter. And it sounds really strange, but that is what got me through the World Championships in a record time for an Aussie athlete, was just carrying less baggage with me, because the kind of little things which were happening during the race, like a GPS watch not working, they say, oh, it's representing your country and the basic things are not working. They would normally trigger all these beliefs of, oh, I will fail, and therefore what will the country say? Now I'm exaggerating a little bit, but in the end, there is a lot at stake. And only by being somebody who just runs and has an experience and sees where it leads to, you don't have to carry that baggage. And suddenly everything is possible.
Wow. Oh, I love hearing you talk, Kai, because you seem to toe the line really well between being able to help someone like myself understand these complex unpackings of performance, and then being able to relate that to like an executive that's been at the top of their game for such a long time. And one thread I want to pull there, which you mentioned, was shifting the focus from who I am to what I'm doing, is that the difference between identity-based thinking and outcome-based thinking. And that was an aha I had, because growing up as a gymnast, a regular routine's like 50 seconds, and it's very explosive, and it's a lot of physical exertion, and it's a lot of muscle mass, and then boom, done. Then you got like 40 minutes before your next routine. And I always told myself I could never be a runner because of that. And so as I do, the masochist that I can be is like, okay, well, if I've told myself this story for a long time, then I'm just going to bite the whole whale and just sign up for a marathon. So living in Utah at the time, Park City, elevation between 6,000 and 9,000 feet. That's suffering. I'll be able to suffer and learn something from that experience. Anywho, about 3 months into training, I just couldn't get out of bed to run. Just couldn't. The motivation wasn't there. It was cold. It was wet. It was snowing. Whatever the reason was, I was telling myself, I just couldn't find the go. But one day it was enough to be able to drag myself out. And during one of the runs, I had this kind of epiphany and this kind of aha was like, I've just been telling everyone that I've signed up for a marathon and I'm going to run a marathon. Never once have I told anyone that I'm a runner. Yet what have I done in the past 3 months? Like 200 miles of running. So I'm telling the wrong story, not to them so much, to myself. I am a runner. And I could be like, no, you're not, Brandon. You're not a runner. You've never been a runner. You've told yourself this story forever. And it's like, well, the proof's there. Look at the Strava. Look at the Garmin. What's it telling you? That you're running. So you must be a runner. And so when the identity shifted, it was amazing. Training became so simple after that. Because what do runners do? Run. And what do they sometimes do? Races. Marathons.
I love it. I absolutely love what you're just saying. And I have a few realizations myself. Just similar conversations. I had lots of discipline conversations with a client this week where they say exactly what you were saying. They're struggling doing what they signed up for and now in business. And what I'm hearing from you is it's that kind of separation. You call it identity, and it is an identity question. Am I a runner? But it's that separation of who am I and who am I not? And by putting that distance between who we think we are and who we actually are, it's just, we create the problem.
Yeah. Bingo. Because when I was saying I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm trying to run a marathon, I was creating so much room for doubt and old stories to live and occupy. Now, it's one thing saying I'm a runner and sitting on the couch and eating pizza and not running. Like, that's one thing, of course. Like, there has to be an element of action and doing. However, the story is so powerful. And I go through it all the time in every phase and iteration of life and I can even witness myself saying these stories when it's happening. And that can just come in the form of chatting to friends. Hey, you doing, man? Oh man, I've just been so busy. I just haven't been able to catch a break, or I'm really nervous about this quarter and hitting these targets. And as the story comes out, there's this other part of my brain that goes, bullshit. But I'm not going to call it out, because then I'll have to admit that I've been actually saying bullshit and believing it. The stories, man, they're so powerful. Like, it's like your upbringing, how you were raised. You know, again, your parents did the best they could with how they were raised and what they know, but you have the choice to either continue that in your life and your relationships, or change it. Change the narrative.
It does. I mean, choice is the key word here. It starts with awareness, but then it's lots of people have awareness and just stop short at that awareness. And then it's stepping into choice. And the question I love to ask myself in similar situations as you were just describing is, who do I want to be? And then one step further is even, who am I? It's, and those two, surprising stuff comes out.
Wow. Have you ever asked the question, who do I want to be? And then who am I, right? Where do I want to go? And where am I? Where am I now? Only to realize that the distance actually isn't there, or isn't that far at all. It's like, oh, I'm already here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the who am I? I'm surprised it's basically the same answer as who do I want to be. They are pretty close to each other because the only distance is the one I create in my head.
Say that again.
It's, as you say, with a runner, am I a runner? Well, we put ourselves as we're not there yet. We say, that's not me. Who says it's not you? I mean, you're right. If I now said I'm a gymnastic person, no, I'm not, because I've not gone a single time to the gym and done anything. But I truly believe if for whatever reason that gave me some meaning and I really wanted to do it, then why not?
The actions would follow.
Yeah. And it starts, I mean, anything new, that's the exciting thing, is we create new stuff. Otherwise, it's rinse and repeat. It's that endless cycle of just going the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
And it all starts with an intention. And then probably speaking it out is the second step. It's just saying, this is what I'm going to do. And that is very different from that blind discipline I was describing before. And it's very different because it's purposeful action.
Purposeful action versus action for the sake of output. Output for the sake of action's sake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Kai, I want to get an insight because I am curious. I've been recently joined a group of men called the Men of Discomfort, and it's essentially a group of men that choose challenge every day. Now, this isn't sabotage challenge, like I'm just going to make my life horrible by saying and doing the wrong things. It's no, like I'm going to challenge myself physically, mentally, emotionally. And as I've been going through this process, the cold showers and the breath work, and I'm getting reminded of those moments, like in those Saturday, the long run. Runners will know each week of training, there's generally the long run, and it's often a weekend. And you're like, oh God, it's going to be however many miles, and I'm probably going to be out there for like 4 hours or longer. And it's just reminding me of those moments where I was just like, what on earth am I doing here? Like just at the bottom of my self-worth and my feeling. It's like running really is a very cathartic kind of process sometimes, especially distance. Can you recall a time, whether in a race or a training session, that you were just at breaking point? Just like, and I want to know the thought process.
Can we go to yesterday just to make it recent?
Sure.
So to just frame it up, I'm currently training for a 150-mile race. It's called Coast to Cozzy here in Australia. It's the pinnacle, literally, of ultra running. So from the beach, you run up to the highest point of Australia, which is Mount Kosciuszko, and it's a huge one. And I DNF'd last year, so it's the first time I did not finish. So it's a big one.
Yeah.
And I'm training for it, and it's happening in 6 weeks' time. So I'm training a lot now in miles. I know it's above 200 kilometers per week. I do at the moment. I would guess that's 120, 130 miles. So I've got tired legs, and every day is a long run in a way.
Yeah.
So yesterday I went out in the morning, 5 a.m. and went out for a training marathon. We're talking 26 miles on heavy legs. No speed attached to it, but still, it's 26 miles.
Let's pause for a second. 26 miles as a training session. Like, as a training session. Some people that's their physical goal for their life. This is just a training session. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so 26 miles in the middle of the week. So it was Thursday morning. And where you say, after that, I had client sessions. So it's going back to work. And the first 5 kilometers, we're talking 3-4 miles, they were horrible, absolutely horrible. Now, what goes through my mind, and that's the downhill kilometers. So from where I live, the first few kilometers are downhill. So that's the easy part. And then obviously, if it's a loop, eventually I will have to come uphill again. And I was just creeping along, and it wasn't good at all. And all this thought process of, oh, this is shit. I'm not as fit as I wanted to be. I used to be faster than this. It's where can I cut this short? How long do I really have to run? What's acceptable for me today to get done? Is summer halving it okay, or is
wow? It's
so
just a
all
flood.
through
All these voices.
all through that. So it's the I can't do this story. And the misery story. And I was very sorry for myself because it didn't feel good. And the legs were heavy and it made sense. Having said all that, there was the point, and it came after like 25, 30 minutes, where I asked myself, what's the opportunity here? And suddenly there was curiosity of saying, oh, obviously a cynical voice directly answered as saying, no, there's no opportunity. It's like, just get it done, cut it short. But what's the opportunity here? And then I realized, I mean, in a 150-mile race, there will be tough times. I know that. Isn't this perfect? Isn't it perfect of, I've got this opportunity. I'm basically at a stage where I could very likely be in the race, and I can just see, how do I deal with it? Because in the race, it might not be another marathon to go. It might be 100 miles to go still at that stage. So how do I deal with it? And I remembered my performance at the World Championships, not in terms of outcome, which I mean, overall I came 11th, but it was that feeling of just effortless running at the end of 24 hours. So heavy legs, my legs would have been worse than they were yesterday in the first few kilometers. And I just chose to tap into that and say, you know what, if I'd done that in the past, I can do that again. And all I need to do is just really allow it to happen. And I just tapped, it became very meditative. And the legs were still tired, but the story wasn't there. So what was suffering beforehand was just an unpleasant somehow, sensation where you say, okay, I can deal with that. Yeah. And with no more effort, per mile, I was getting 20 seconds faster per mile, just with no more effort. And what was crawling along, it was far from my fastest marathon, but that's not the point of the session anyway. No. I ran that thing in less than 3.5 hours, just ran through it and had breakfast, went to work and had a full day afterwards. And it was really rewarding.
Because it wasn't finishing the run, it was winning the victory over the voices.
Correct.
Right? That the resistance, as Stephen Pressfield would call it, is just this old part of us that wants to bring us back to that wants us to live in that place of doubt and not believing that we're capable. Yet in the moment, you were able to go, Kai, we've been here before. We know this. We know what to do here. We know what this means. And just further proof that, and the reason why I resonate with this so much and the Men of Discomfort is that those little victories, whether it's the victory over the voice in the head, whether it's the first 5K without walking for that individual, whatever that victory is, to me, it builds a bridge of belief that, wow, these other things in my life that are challenging me no longer seem as challenging. Yeah. We had this conversation in our company the other day. Every week on a Friday, we get together for an hour and we don't talk business. It's all just personal victories and checking in and chances to connect. And it's probably my favorite hour of the week. And a conversation.
Let me just add one thing.
Sure.
Because it just popped up, which I think is really, really important. We shouldn't lose that. It's that victory doesn't come from toughness. Really important to me, because trying to just push through at the beginning of a marathon, I mean, we all know it's very likely not to work. And maybe it even works on one day saying, I pushed through this. But next time I get to the same situation, I know how hard that was, and I'm more likely to fail next time around. So the real success, the element of success here is, I find it's gentleness with myself. And I can highly recommend that is, don't try to be victorious with somehow our amygdala. It is way older than what we are. It's like evolution has a really good mechanism which says, no, stop here.
Yeah.
So it's through gentleness, it's the opposite force, which actually conquers it at the end.
Thank you for speaking to that. Yes. The kindness and grace for self. That's so true. That's so true because, it's the carrot and the stick in my mind, how I frame it. Some people are motivated by the carrot, others by the stick. But more often than not, when the stick has been the only motivator, it's a very harsh way to live. It's a very harsh. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about like what energy source do you operate from? Is it clean energy or is it dirty energy? Is it coal or is it solar? And I've had the need for coal sometimes. I've had the need for a friend or a family member or my partner or myself to be like, dude, get the up and stop this story you're telling yourself. But then there's times where it's like, hey man, now this, you're doing your best. Like just left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Great point, Kai. Because it's so easy as men to get into the toughness conversation. Just grit your teeth. Don't complain about it. Just do it. But time and place, huh?
I see it as a short-term motivator, which is very effective.
Yeah.
But the longer the challenge somehow goes for, the more it runs out of fuel. That's just what happens.
Yeah. Well said. Beautifully said. So, mate, you've written a book. Right, turning right. I want to know the inspiration, the motivation, the why behind this thing, and what impact you want it to have in the world or in people's lives.
So the why, obviously, it is about turning right. So I tell the story of me turning right at my garden gate, and then where it unfolds in running and business and life, including childhood stories. So somehow the entire conversation we've somehow just had the essence of that in the book. And the why is, I feel we're all capable of so much more. And I don't feel that. I know that, and I've experienced it. It's that, how do we reach the next level, and by letting go of who we think we are? It's that redefining ourselves over and over again. And I somehow felt that just telling my own story, it's not about my story, it's just using that as an example to take the reader on their story. So every single at every end of a chapter, there are some check-in questions. So really asking, what does this mean to you now as a reader, and taking them along on that kind of inner journey because the impact I would like to have is not playing out our habits, which have gotten us very far, but keep on going with them forever. It's, how do we have the courage to try something new, whatever that might be, and experience that we are capable of so much more, and then bring good to the world through that. So it's not me doing great stuff, it's us doing great stuff.
Fantastic. So you're inviting people into a new narrative that they're writing. It's not you telling them, it's them asking the question, like, wow, like what is possible? Yeah.
And it is less so a development journey, it's more an identity shift. That's really what it is. So I'm pitching pretty high here, but that's what we're all capable of.
Fantastic, Kai. What's the next challenge for you, my friend? Having achieved such incredible things at such a young age, at this point of life, like what's the next Everest for you? Outside of the Kosciuszko piece, because I mean that's enormous in itself.
It's interesting. It's I don't have a big thing out there. I know there will lots is coming, and for me it is more through collaboration and seeing on the business side as a as an executive coach, as a facilitator of transformation, how can I shift other people's lives and help them step up to the next level? So I'm now close to 2 years into that journey. So I noticed it starts working, and there is some impact, but I'm early on in the journey, and I also know that over time that will hopefully just get to another level through the challenges we're facing. So but I don't have any particular thing in mind. And thinking back to what you said beforehand, I'm trying not to separate myself from where I'm not yet. So because whenever I hold somehow scarcity of saying, well, I'm not capable of that, I'm not yet there, it slows everything down. Whereas I'm just trying to hold abundance. And I'm a realist that there is way more which can happen, but I'm not cutting myself off from there saying, well, one day I'll get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's focusing on left foot, right? What's right in front of you.
That's it. And that has gotten me much, much further than somehow always thinking of the carrot at the very end.
Yeah. Well said, Kai. Well said. Well, Matt, I'm sure a lot of people are intrigued to find out more about you and the book. And so I've just posted a link for those watching live. I've just posted it in the comments. But how can we find out more about you and follow you on your journey?
So obviously, turninright.com as a homepage, just there you find more contact details. You'll find me on social media. You'll find me on LinkedIn. The book is available on the likes of Amazon as Audible. Lots of people love just listening to it. You've already listened to my voice. It is my voice for the entire book, telling my story, taking you on your own journey. So that's probably a good place to start.
Fantastic. Well, Kai, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And we want to thank you, the listener, for joining us for this live recording of the Mankind podcast. This is the place where, we pride ourselves on creating a space where men can take off the masks. They can ask the tough questions. We can have the conversations on taboo topics that aren't necessarily safe in particular households, in particular communities. And it's also a chance to kind of get away from the media's magnifying glass, because guess what? We as men, as human beings, are not perfect. We don't always have the right words. We don't always say the most kosher things. And you know what? Rather than call each other out, we get a chance to call each other in here to a new conversation, a new way, a new paradigm. And Kai, I want to thank you for helping us with that today and getting to know you and your story and the work that you're doing in the world today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish everybody the very best on their journey.
Beautiful. Well, again, for those that have joined us live, you can find the Mankind podcast. You can find it through links we're going to have in the comments here, and also in this live. You just go to the info and you'll be able to find the podcast, and it's everywhere where you listen to podcasts. So I think you'll love the show that we're putting together. The viewership's been growing each and every week, and we're just so grateful for the support and the feedback that we continually receive from all of you. I've been Brendan Clift, your host of the Mankind podcast. Kai, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. This has been another episode of the Mankind podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.